you know, so that you know for yourself what your rights are as it relates to this new policy, and you can tell your loved ones as well. And this obviously applies to the city of San Francisco. So I'll go through a PowerPoint that our friends at the Public Defender's Office put together. And if you have questions at any time, since it's a relatively small group, feel free to either come off mute and just ask the question so this can be more of a conversation than a presentation. Okay, I am trying to share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay, by the way?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. All right. So as I mentioned, we're here today to talk about pretext stops and what the new SFPD policy is. And the first question to really think about is, how did we get here and why are we here, right? As most of you know, traffic stops are the most common ways that most of us have our interactions with police. They happen, thousands and thousands times a day. And it's the most common way that people come into contact with police officers and cops in general. And the reason why it was important for us to be engaged in this advocacy was because they are so common. Traffic stops have also been one of the reasons why so many people have ended up dying at the hands of the police, right? So many of you recall from many years ago, the cases of Philando Castile, Sam DuBose, and many others, including Sandra Bland, whose interaction started with a traffic stop, and then when she was arrested and taken to the jail, she was found dead the next morning, right? So traffic stops are really important to really look at because they can be the ways through which most people come into contact with the criminal legal system, with cops, and they can have deadly consequences for many people, and especially for Black and brown people. So who was the coalition to end biased stops in San Francisco? These are all the coalition partners that we had, but ACLU, CARE, GLIDE, the Public Defender's Office, Lawyers Committee, the SF Bicycle Coalition, Walk SF, were some of the core groups that led this work, along with some others. Like Coalition on Homelessness and other folks who, legal services for prisoners with children, and others that I may be forgetting who were involved in this effort. That when we started it, we thought it was going to be a 6 to 9 month advocacy project that ended up becoming almost a 2.5 years project, advocacy project that engaged a lot of San Francisco residents, a lot of organizations that serve San Franciscans, the police commission, and many various communities throughout the city. So what is a pretext stop, right? So pretext stops are old police tactics. Usually what it means is that the cop will pull you over for, let's say, like an expired tags or failure to signal or whatever reason, but it usually is a pretext, or it's the thing that's used to be able to search for evidence or ask more questions that are unrelated to the actual reason why the cop stopped you, but is used as a way to investigate other unrelated crimes just based on the cop's hunch, right? And what that really in practice means is that if you're a Black person driving in a white neighborhood, the cop doesn't think you belong there, so they stop you for whatever traffic violation that they can find, and they'll ask you questions like, "What are you doing in this neighborhood? Uh, do you have guns? Can we search your car?" They'll search your car to see if they can find something. Um, and so the traffic stop, whatever the reason, the traffic related reason that they stopped you, is really just the initial way they can stop you so that they can try to figure out why you're in a particular area, or they can search your car, or they can try to find evidence of a completely unrelated crime just because they don't think you should be in that area, or they think you're suspicious for whatever reason. Typically, many times, these are the kinds of stops that pose no safety concern. So things like expired registration or like one broken tail light, they don't really present a real traffic safety concern, but they are used as a way for police to stop you, to search your car, to search your person, um, and to do that. But they don't actually address like underlying safety concerns. But these kinds of stops allow the police to question the driver or passengers and search the cars by asking for permission, which these are things called consent searches, where there's a cop with a gun says, "Can I search your car?" And most people, because you're afraid and you just want to be done with that situation, you allow them, you say, "Yeah, sure, you can search my car," and then they search your car and see if they can find something. Um, and if you tell them, "No, you can't search my car," which is your right to do, sometimes they'll ask you questions like, "Oh, are you hiding something? Then why won't you let me search your car," etc. Um, and ask you questions that make you feel like, or that pressure you into essentially, quote unquote, giving consent to have your car searched. And the police do this because the law says that they can do it as long as the officers have observed a traffic violation, and that it doesn't actually matter why they stopped you, as long as there is some traffic violation that they have observed. So what's the problem with traffic stops? The problem is that when you look at it, when we look at it in practice, and when we look at the data of who the police are stopping, they're essentially used as a way to harass people of color, and primarily Black drivers, pedestrians, or cyclists. And when we look at specifically San Francisco data, we find that Black San Franciscans are less than 5% of the city, but they made up for about 26% of stops and 36% of the searches. And I believe this was from the third quarter of 2022 data. We also find that more than half the stops where the officers conducted what is called consent-only searches, more than half of those searches were done on people of color, as opposed to less than 30% of searches, consent searches, happened on white drivers or white individuals. And what this essentially says is that when the police stop you, if you are a person of color, more than half the time they asked to search your car and they ended up searching your car. But if you were white, they only asked to search your car less than a third of the time. And what this means is that this contributes to the mass incarceration of people of color. As I was saying with the previous examples, it has led to multiple excessive force or violence, and instances of police misconduct. We have seen all those countless videos of, even if the person doesn't actually get killed, the situation, the traffic stop escalates really quickly because the cop is either being aggressive, they don't like being asked any questions like, "Why did you stop me? Why do I have to give you my license?" or any question that the person has. And the situation quickly gets escalated, and people end up getting beat or having significant force used on them, and sometimes deadly force used on them. And when we look at the third quarter of 2021, RIPA data, and RIPA is the racial and identity profiling law that passed a few years ago that mandated that local police departments have to gather and report the data of the people that they're stopping and what they're stopping them for. When we look at the SFPD specific data, the police were 13 times more likely to use force against Black people than they were against white people. The other problem with pretext stops is that they don't actually increase traffic safety, right? Because for the most part, they're not stopping people, for dangerous driving conduct, like, running a red light or, running a stop sign or, etc. But majority of the time, they're actually stopping people for non-safety related things like a broken tail light or like having something on having something on your rear view mirror, or having a broken tail light, or having expired tags. These are the kinds of things that police are stopping people for, and spending countless hours harassing people, searching vehicles, only to find little to nothing. And none of this is actually increasing traffic safety. And that the time and resources that are wasted in traffic stops are stopping and wasting city resources that could actually be spent on the good things that everyone would like, right? Things to address housing instability, make sure transportation is available, education, jobs, healthcare, the things that we all know create safe and healthy communities. So what does this policy limiting pretext stops do? What does it concretely do? So it does three main things. One is that it limits the types of violations officers can use to stop someone, right? So there's a list of 9 things that the cops cannot stop you for if they're the only thing that they've observed. Second, it bans the police from asking you unrelated questions to the stop and to ask for permission to search the person of a car. So that means if they stopped you for, let's say, like, running a stop sign or something, that the questions they ask you have to be just about that, right? They can't be about other things that have nothing to do with that, with that. And then lastly, it requires SFPD to publicly report, the traffic stop data to the police commission to make sure that officers are not violating this policy, but also to make sure that we can track if they're not stopping people for these things that they are prohibited from doing so, that they're not using other parts of the vehicle code to try to stop people or to try to get around it. So what are the things that police cannot stop you for if all you have, or if all that happened is these things, right? So if your car has, if it doesn't have a front license plate, but it does have a license plate in the back, they cannot just stop you for that. If your registration is expired for less than 1 year, you can't be detained for that. Or stopped for that. If the car has no functioning or illuminated rear tail lights or rear brake lights, you can't be stopped for that. If you have an object hanging from your rear view mirror, any sort of like anything that doesn't actually block your view or can cause an accident, and these are things like people have like crosses on their rear view mirror, people have either like religious things on their rearview mirror, or just the thing that makes your car smell nice, like little things that people put on their rearview mirror. These are things that you can't be stopped for. Can be detained for failing to use a turn signal continuously for 100 feet before turning. Can be detained or stopped for sleeping in your vehicle. And if some folks remember, Willie McCoy was sleeping in his vehicle when the Vallejo Police Department came and shot up his car and killed him. So those are things you can't be detained or stopped for. or any other pedestrian infraction unless there's an immediate danger of crash, right? But anything that's related to pedestrian infraction, these are things that SFPD cannot detain you for or stop you for if it's just one of these things, one of these violations. So what can they do? What can SFPD do, right? So the police can still stop someone and issue a citation for any traffic violation that's not listed on the previous slide. So that means if you're speeding, if you're running a red light, if you're driving under the influence, if you're riding a bike on the sidewalk, these are things that the police can still stop you and give you a ticket for. Or the police can stop you for one of the listed violations in the previous slide if you are in one of these four situations, right? So if, for example, you are speeding and they stop you for that, you can also get a ticket for, having a broken tail light or something. If you or a passenger or driver was involved in a car crash, that's something you can be stopped for. If you're driving a commercial vehicle, and you have one of those violations listed, you can be stopped. Or if you or the person in your car matches the description of a person or a car involved in a serious felony, but only when someone might be seriously injured or killed if that person is not caught immediately. So these are some of the exceptions or situations where the police can stop you for one of the specified 9 violations. So what should you do if you're arrested? Always ask for a lawyer and exercise your right to remain silent. Because you say like you want to remain silent, it does not mean you're guilty. It does not mean you did anything wrong. It does not mean that you have to say anything or you have to be pressured to do anything. There's nothing wrong that you are doing by saying, I would like to remain silent and I would like a lawyer. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and you should always feel comfortable to do that. Even if the police respond to you saying things like, well, if you're innocent, why do you want a lawyer? Or if you didn't do anything, why do you want to remain silent? As a way to try to pressure you into trying to prove that you're innocent or you don't know anything or you didn't do anything, you don't actually have to respond to that. You can just say, I'd like to remain silent, and I'd like a lawyer, and keep it there. That is the best way to protect yourself and to protect your loved ones. As a reminder, young people have an unwaivable right to consult with a public defender after their arrest. That means like young people have to have a public defender after they get arrested. And also they can always request that a responsible adult be present during any questioning by the police. Secondly, if you believe that an officer violated the policy, meaning that they pulled you over because you had expired tags, but they were only expired for 6 months or 3 months, or you were sleeping in your car and they detained you for that, or any of the 9 offenses that we talked about, we want you to file a complaint with the Department of Police Accountability, so that way those violations are tracked. And if you need assistance with filing the complaint or an advocate, you can contact the integrity unit at the public defender's office for assistance. You can contact the ACLU at our intake line, and we can help you with how to file the complaint with the Department of Police Accountability. And we'll share some of these resources as to why pretext stops are ineffective, why they waste officer time, why they're dangerous, why they're dangerous for communities of color in particular, and why they don't actually increase traffic safety. And then if you have questions, feel free to email us, the ACLU, or the Public Defender's Integrity Unit at the email and phone number below. And I'll stop the the presentation and open it up for questions.
Hi, this is Valerie. I work with At the Crossroads, and we work with unhoused youth and young adults. And when you say a young person is automatically entitled to a public defender and a responsible adult, is that only people under 18 or does that go to 24?
I believe it's under 18, the unwaivable right. Brian or Zach, correct me if I'm wrong. But everyone has a right to an attorney and they can always ask for that.
Thank you. And the other thing I was wondering, is it possible to have the slide deck emailed to us?
Yes, we will send out the slide deck and we also have a Spanish version as well. And we'll send out both of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Other questions anyone has?
I'm curious to know if you have any idea of the results of complaints that have been raised to that, what did you call it, that Office of Advocacy or?
The Department of Police Accountability.
Yeah, I mean, knowing how our police department has been in the last few years, I'm just wondering whether people actually have success with that or not, or any kind of results.
That's a good question. Zach or Dylan, you guys probably know better than me in terms of some of the outcomes of the complaints people submit to the Department of Police Accountability. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, this is Zach Dillon from the Public Defender's Office. We make a lot of complaints against SFPD to the Department of Police Accountability, and some are upheld and some aren't. Kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. This policy is so new, we haven't tracked any complaints from the initial step through adjudication yet, so we don't know how either the DPA or the SFPD are going to handle these complaints going forward yet.
Right. Well, sounds like we don't have a lot of questions. So as Tessa said, we'll share the slides and the articles and all that. And thank you all for making the time tonight. And I'll turn it over to Tessa and Christopher.
Thanks, everyone. And like you heard, this is a new policy. So if you are, I mean, some of you have said that you are affiliated with groups of folks who may be impacted by these issues, please feel free to reach out. You'll receive an email from Tanisha later this week, or a call from Chris later this week as well. Please reach out and let us know what you need and how we can support you in getting this information out to as many people as possible, especially folks who are most likely to get stopped by the police. And with that, I will bid you all good night and thank you for joining our Know Your Rights training today.
Thanks, everyone.